Have you ever felt your world shatter so completely that the pieces don't even resemble the life you thought you had? That was me, Lily Harper, 28 years old, screaming into my phone at my fiancé. Ethan, my voice raw and unrecognizable. My laptop sat open in front of me, mocking me with photos from Ryan's bachelor party. Ethan grinning like a kid on Christmas, drink in hand, surrounded by women in barely their dresses. The timestamp hit me like a punch to the gut. 2:45 p.m., last Saturday. The exact moment I stood watching my father's casket disappear into the earth. I'd called Ethan 3 times that day, 3 times, and he'd texted back some lame excuse about being too sick to show up. Sick? The only thing sick was the lie staring back at me from those Instagram posts. My name's Lily, and at 28, I never imagined I'd lose my dad and the man I was supposed to marry in the same gut-wrenching week. Ethan wasn't dead, not physically, but the version of him I'd loved? That guy was gone the second I saw his smug face beaming in those pictures. The worst part wasn't the party or the women. It was the pure, unfiltered joy on his face while I was drowning in the darkest day of my life. I sat at my kitchen counter, still wrapped in my dad's old plaid cardigan, the one I'd clung to since he passed, staring at the 3-carat ring on my finger. It used to sparkle with promise. Now it felt like a shackle burning into my skin. You don't get it, Lily, Ethan said over the phone, his voice dripping with that condescending tone I'd started noticing more lately. Ryan's my best friend. This was his last big hurrah before tying the knot. Your dad, well, he was already gone. Me being there wouldn't have changed that. His words slammed into me like a freight train. My dad, my quiet, steady rock, had never trusted Ethan. Even from his hospital bed, he'd give me that gentle, knowing look and say, "You sure about him, sunshine? You'll see who he really is one day." I'd brushed it off then, but now, just days after burying him, it clicked. Dad had seen the truth I'd been too blind to face. Looking back, the signs were screaming at me long before that funeral. Dad's fight with cancer had been a brutal 8-month war. I watched the man who raised me alone after Mom died, the guy who taught me how to fix a flat tire and never missed a single dance recital, fade away. Through every chemo session, every soul-crushing doctor's visit, Ethan always had an out: work emergencies, family stuff, some last-minute crisis with his buddies. I'd make excuses for him, telling myself and Dad that he just couldn't handle hospitals. Grief, though? It rips the blinders off. It shows you the lies you've been feeding yourself. Dad was my anchor. He worked 2 jobs to get me through college, never complained, always showed up. Even when he got sick, he'd squeeze my hand and say, "Promise me you'll look after yourself, sunshine. Don't let anyone dull your shine." I'd nod, dodge the deeper meaning, and change the subject, anything to avoid what he was really warning me about. My best friend Mia had tried to wake me up too. She'd watched Ethan brush off my ideas at dinner parties or forget to include me in big work events where other partners were welcome. "He treats you like a footnote, Lily," she'd say. Soft but firm. But I was too deep in my fairy tale bubble, the hotshot marketing exec who'd swept me off my feet, the picture-perfect beach proposal, the glossy happily ever after I'd sold myself on. Dad's death blew that illusion to smithereens, forcing me to see Ethan for what he was. A guy who'd party while I buried my father, who'd laugh while my world imploded. I took a shaky breath and scrolled through the photos again. There was Ethan tossing cash at a dancer like some frat boy, while my mascara streaked down my face at the gravesite. Another shot. Him hoisting Ryan onto his shoulders by a pool at 4 p.m., right when I was choking through Dad's eulogy. Each image twisted the knife deeper. The comments underneath? Salt in the wound. Best bachelor party ever. Living your best life, bro. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with unread condolence texts I couldn't face. "Lily, you still there?" Ethan's voice crackled through the line, pulling me back. "Look, I know the timing sucked, but you're overreacting. I couldn't just ditch Ryan. He's been my best friend since high school." I could hear his office in the background, phones ringing, keyboards clacking. He couldn't even give me his full attention for this. Something snapped inside me. The tears dried up, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. "You're right, Ethan," I said, twisting the ring off my finger. The timing did suck. Just like it sucked when you bailed on Dad's last Christmas for your company ski trip. Or when you ditched his birthday dinner halfway through because Ryan needed help moving. I could almost hear him rolling his eyes. That's when it hit me, this wasn't just about the party. It was years of little betrayals I'd let slide, boundaries I'd let him stomp over. Red flags. I dressed up in pretty pink excuses. Dad would have been heartbroken to see how small I'd made myself for this guy. Enough with the guilt trip, Lily, Ethan snapped, his voice rising. I get that you're upset about your dad, but life moves on. Ryan dropped thousands on that party, and as his best man, I had to be there. I cut him off, my hand gripping the phone until my knuckles whitened. As his best man, huh? So you had to do body shots while I said goodbye to my father? Had to pose with those girls while I picked out his casket? My voice trembled, not with sadness anymore, but with 3 years of pent-up rage finally breaking loose. Tell me, Ethan, did you even think about me once that day? Silence. Then, in that patronizing tone he'd mastered, of course I did, babe. I even sent you a text, remember? A bitter laugh ripped out of me. One text, a pathetic, I'm too sick to come, followed by a sad emoji. That's what my dad's funeral, my heartbreak, was worth to him. I flipped open my laptop again, pulling up my email. Here's something funny, Ethan. Ryan's fiancé just sent me videos from the party. She feels awful about it. Want to guess what time you posted that TikTok of you doing the worm on the beach? Because I can tell you exactly what I was doing at 3:27 p.m. Trying to find the guts to read Dad's eulogy. There was rustling on his end, a door shutting. Finally, he was taking this seriously. Lily, listen, he whispered. Those videos don't show the whole story. I was just keeping Ryan's spirits up. You know how he gets when he drinks. More excuses. Always more excuses. Let me tell you what those videos do show. I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. You knocking back shots at 2 p.m. when I texted you about the reception. You dancing on tables at 5 p.m. when I was sorting through Dad's stuff with Mia because I couldn't face it alone. Most of all, they show who you really are, not the guy I've been kidding myself about for 3 years. You're hysterical, he hissed, his voice low and sharp. This isn't about the party, it's about your dad. You're just looking for someone to blame because he's gone. His words stung like a slap. But I glanced at the framed photo on my desk. Dad and me at my college graduation, both grinning like we'd won the lottery. You're right about one thing, I said, calm washing over me. This isn't just about the party. It's about how Mia drove 3 hours in the rain to be with me while you were living it up. It's about how Ryan's fiancé, who I've met twice, sent me a condolence card while you couldn't be bothered. It's about how you've proven you'll always pick your own fun over my pain. He started to argue, but I didn't let him. Let's talk about time, Ethan, I continued, scrolling through my phone. Here's you doing karaoke at 6 p.m. while I sobbed in my car because Dad's empty house was too much. Oh, and this gem, Sunday morning, you with a mimosa poolside while I settled the funeral home bills. Want me to keep going? A long pause. Then, grudgingly, okay, I screwed up. I'm sorry, all right? But you can't toss 3 years away over one mistake. Think about the wedding, the house we planned. Are you really giving up our future over this? I stared at the ring on my counter, remembering how I'd shown it to Dad in the hospital, expecting him to gush. Instead, he'd held my hand and asked, does he make you proud, sunshine? I'd laughed it off then. Now, it was a siren I couldn't ignore. One mistake doesn't end a relationship, I said quietly. But this isn't one mistake. It's the first time I've been brave enough to see them all. What are you saying? Ethan's voice cracked, panic creeping in. I dropped the ring into an envelope with the printed party photos. I'm saying my dad's last gift to me was clarity. He spent his life showing me real love, showing up, putting me first, being there when it's hard. You spent 3 years showing me the opposite. The silence between us was thick with everything I'd left unsaid, every disappointment I'd swallowed, every time I'd shrunk myself to fit his world. Finally he spat, so that's it? You're throwing it all away? God, Lily, I knew you were emotional, but this is insane. Take some time, cool off, call me when you're rational. Actually, I said, sealing the envelope. I'm rational for the first time in years. The ring's in your mailbox tomorrow. Don't contact me again. Before he could reply, I hung up and blocked him. My hands shook, but my head was clear. Dad's voice rang in my ears. You'll figure him out eventually, sunshine. Tears fell, but I smiled. You were right, Dad. You were always right. The weeks after were a haze, condolence cards, casseroles from neighbors, and a deafening silence from Ethan. I'd braced for him to fight for me, to show up with flowers and promises. Instead, I got ranting texts from his sister, accusing me of breaking his heart. I blocked her too. Mia practically lived with me those first brutal days, showing up with takeout and quiet strength, letting me cry about Dad one minute and curse Ethan the next. The worst part, I told her one night, curled up in Dad's cardigan, is I keep wanting to call him about all this. Every time something happens, he's still my first thought. She just nodded. Some hurts don't need fixing. They need someone to sit with you through them. The real gut punch came when I started clearing out Dad's house. In his study, I found a letter he'd written weeks before he died. "My dearest Lily," it began, "if you're reading this. I'm not there to say it myself, but you need to hear this." He wrote about his pride in me, how I'd lit up his life. "Then I've watched you shrink to fit Ethan's world, sunshine. I've seen you dim your shine so he doesn't feel small. That's not the daughter I raised. That's not who you're meant to be." Reading that, surrounded by Dad's coffee mug and folded glasses, I broke. I wasn't just mourning him, I was mourning the me I'd lost with Ethan, the way I'd apologized for having needs, settled for crumbs and called it love. Dad saw it all, and with his last words, he'd set me free. That night, I dug into old photos of Ethan and me. The proposal, me glowing, him already distracted. Last Christmas, him schmoozing at Dad's party instead of celebrating. Even our best days were laced with hints I'd ignored. "How do you see it so clearly, Dad?" I whispered to the empty room. Why couldn't I? 3 days later, I crashed into Ryan and his new wife, Julia, at the grocery store. My heart leapt into my throat. First faces from Ethan's world since the fallout. Before I could bolt, Julia hugged me tight. "Lily, I'm so sorry," she said, her eyes soft with guilt. "I've wanted to reach out, but I didn't know if you'd want me to. What Ethan did, it's unforgivable." Ryan shuffled behind her, avoiding my gaze. I told him not to come. He mumbled. When he showed up, I asked about the funeral. He said you told him not to worry, that you had enough support. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the aisle closing in. "I should have known he was lying," Ryan added. "I should have pushed harder. I'm sorry." Their regret cracked something open in me. "The funny thing," I said, a dry laugh escaping, "he didn't even send flowers. No card. Just that one sick text, then nothing, until I saw the party pics." Julia's face hardened. "That's not even the worst of it," she said, pulling out her phone. "He's been posting about how you dumped him because you're unstable after your dad's death. Says you'll come around once you're thinking straight." She showed me his posts, carefully spun tales of the patient fiancé weathering his grieving girlfriend's meltdown. Instead of rage, I felt calm. "Let him spin his story," I said, standing taller. "The people who matter know the truth. The ones who buy his crap don't belong in my life." It's been 6 months since Dad left, 4 since I cut Ethan loose. The grief still ebbs and flows. Some days I smile at Dad's pictures. Others I reach for the phone to call him. But Ethan? That hurt faded fast, replaced by a freedom I didn't know I'd lost. Last week, in Dad's final box, I found his leather journal. On the last page he'd written, "My Lily's stronger than she knows. Life's toughest moments are gifts in disguise. They show us who we are. And who others really are." Next to it, a sketch of a butterfly breaking free. That was it. Losing Dad shattered me, but it also broke Ethan's hold over me. Sometimes your biggest loss hands you your greatest strength. Now on the other side, I'm different, more me than ever. Grief hollows you out, but it makes room for truth. Dad's absence is a daily ache, but it's not a burden anymore. It's a reminder to value myself, to demand real love, to shine unapologetically. Ethan's a closed book. Ring, photos, illusions, all gone. What's left is better peace. I've started journaling in Dad's notebook. Each page a step forward, a reclaiming of my voice. Tonight I'm on his porch, watching the sunset paint the hills in colors he'd call perfect for fishing. For the first time in forever, I feel hope. Life doesn't just stumble on after heartbreak, it blooms, even in loss. Even in the ruins of a love that never was. Wrapped in Dad's cardigan, I know I'm ready to grow.